Now, for more on what is fast becoming an international banking crisis, particularly with what's happening in France, we are joined this morning by David Bowers. He's the managing director and global strategist at London's Absolute Strategy Research. ASR provides independent investment strategy advice to institutional clients around the world. David is the former chief global strategist for Merrill Lynch. David, welcome. Good morning to you. How serious is the situation in Europe right now? The pressure on BNP Paribas having to refute rumors that it has been locked out of the U.S. money markets?
The answer is it's very serious indeed. And the reason for that is that the sovereign debt crisis and the banking sector are now joined at the hip. They're inseparably entwined. And until you stabilise sovereign credit, the sovereign bond situation, the banks are going to continue to be under pressure, and the uncertainty is what is really undermining the markets at the moment.
Scarlett just went through some of the debt, obviously, that we're continuing to monitor. What about this 65 billion euro figure for French bank exposure to only Greek debt? And that's not even what all of Scarlett went through, Italy, Spain, Portugal. What could this mean for Europe's economy? Are you talking recession?
Well, I think there are reasons for thinking about recession in Italy and Spain already. We've got very, very tight monetary policy in Europe. These guys aren't just getting high 10-year interest rates, they're getting high 2-year interest rates. The euro has been very, very strong. The ECB has been slow to start easing again. I think in southern Europe, you're going to see recession next year. I think in Germany, you're going to see industrial production slow very, very rapidly. And the last thing you need for this crisis is slower growth. The business cycle really matters here. A world where growth expectations are tumbling intensifies this crisis very, very dramatically. A world where you suddenly see some recovery, emerging markets, China, US, that changes the picture. So the business cycle has an important role to play here. As for France, France is the flashpoint. It's got a 4% current account deficit. It desperately needs external funding. And if you really want something to make the Germans stop and think what the consequences of their actions might be, the relationship with France is critical. Up until now, it's been down there in southern Europe. It's not been a core problem. It's now
Germany's
a core problem.
kind of the dad and France is kind of the mom as far as the Euro region goes.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
David, do you feel at all optimistic about potential resolution for any of these concerns that you cite?
I think you've got to remember that the euro is core to Europe. No one wants the euro to break down. Germany and German industry does not want the euro to break down. Any breakup of the euro is messy, it's complicated, it's divisive. It doesn't put a stop to the problem if, say, Greece were to leave. So there is this commitment to try and get Europe working. The trouble is that Europe started with some core institutions missing, and trying to put those institutional frameworks in a crisis environment like this is very, very tricky. And Germany, as you pointed out in your comments, Germany is constrained politically in terms of what it's able to do. It doesn't want a transfer union. It wants a rule-based system where everybody signs up to the constitutional commitment to keep their debt under control in the way that Germany has.
Europe needs money, David. You pointed out, you said France is a flashpoint. It has a 4% current account deficit. So essentially, that means the country just needs money, right? Pure and simple. What if China were to step in? What are the chances of that? Because we've been talking about China potentially coming to the rescue by buying Italian bonds. What if China's desire for inroads in Europe leads to France also?
I think one has to take the Chinese initiatives very, very seriously. It's not just an Italian story. Many of the peripheral European Eurozone economies have been approached. There's been phenomenal dialogue between Athens and Beijing, for example, over the last 18 months in lots of different ways. And I think you've got to look at it from China's point of view. So there are three things that China wants out of this. First of all, it wants an alternative to the dollar. It needs the euro to survive. That's really, really important.
China wants a strong euro.
It needs a euro. It just needs an alternative currency to buy into to the US dollar. Secondly, it needs better access to European markets. If the US consumer is going ex-growth, then Europe is a market where China can still grow market share. And I think thirdly, it would love to see Europe lift the arms embargo on China. That's obviously, hugely a political issue. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's on the agenda.
Technology, weapons, military systems.
So basically,
right?
and we know that there are good relationships between Germany and China. They have a lot in common. There's very strong trade linkages. You know, I think we've got to start thinking about whether China is going to be a much bigger player in the European political and economic scene, and helping Europe out of this crisis is one way in which you can build that relationship.
David, are we perhaps making a little too much out of China's interest in Europe, given the fact that China has already been, so to speak, to the rescue of Greece, Spain, and Portugal, and that doesn't appear to have done anything to prevent those bond yields from soaring? Look at Spain, look at Portugal, Greece, 21%.
I don't think China is the total solution, don't get me wrong there, but I think it has an important role to play. And if for the right deal, if you think what they're getting on US Treasuries at the moment, that's not a great return either on the instrument or in terms of access to the US market. So I think China plays the long game. I think Europe has to pull its own weight as well, and I think you do need to at least resolve the uncertainty over sovereign credit, because until you do that, you aren't going to begin to stabilise these Eurozone banks.
Key questions indeed. David, very good of you to join us. We'd love to see you again.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a pleasure.
David Bowers of Absolute Strategy Research.